Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be episode 4 of our Become a Canvas Pro course, where in this episode we are going to be learning how to interact with the canvas. So we know how to resize our canvas, we know how to draw elements on it, we know how to animate those elements, but we don't know how to add interactivity with our canvas so that when we hover over the canvas or when we click on it or when we put our finger on our phone or so forth, we don't know how to actually get these elements to interact with the events that are occurring on the screen. So this is the end goal. We want to be able to produce something cool like this where we have animation, our balls bouncing off the edge of the screen, but at the same time our circles are growing as they come in contact with our mouse. So this is going to be the end goal, and this is what we're going to produce by the end of this video. So where we left off, let me go ahead and exit out of this tab. This is where we left off. We have a bunch of large black circles bouncing off the edges of the screen in slow motion. So we have a little bit to go. We have to change the sizes of the circles randomly. We have to change their colors randomly, and we also have to add that interactivity I was talking about. So first thing first, let's go ahead and add that interactivity. To add interactivity to your canvas piece, you're going to need to know one important concept, and that concept is event listeners. So if you haven't heard of an event listener, basically it's a function that's going to be fired over and over again as long as an event is occurring on the screen. So let's say my event is mouse movement. If I'm moving my mouse like I am right now, we're basically going to be calling a function within our JavaScript. And that function is only going to be called as long as the event is occurring, so only when I move my mouse. And there are a multitude of different events we can call. We can call things such as mouse down, a click event, we can call it mouse up event, and we can also call touch events for mobile devices. So to create an event listener, we are going to go into our code, call our window, and add an event listener like so. So this takes 3 arguments, but we really only need to focus on the first 2. We first need to declare what type of event we want to monitor. We want to monitor our mouse's position whenever we move it across our screen. So in order to monitor our mouse's movement, we are going to put in mouse move as the event we want to monitor. So now that we know which event we want to monitor, we now need a function to call whenever this event occurs. So we can insert a function name, such as animate if we were to put our animate function in here, but that wouldn't really make sense. It's much easier to just add an anonymous function, so we are going to do that instead. So now whenever we move our mouse across our canvas, this function is going to be called. And we can test this out by inserting a console log statement, put some dummy text in there, refresh the page, move your mouse around, and you'll see that our console log statement is being outputted into the console over and over again as long as we move our mouse, only when we move our mouse. If we stop, it's not going to be incrementing, but when we move our mouse, you'll see that's being called over and over and over again. So basically, in order to get these circles to interact with our mouse whenever we're moving it, we need to take into consideration some geometry. We need to get the distance between our mouse position and the distance between each of these individual circles. And if the distance between our mouse position and each of these individual circles is, let's say, less than 50, then we want to make sure that circle is growing. And if it's greater than 50, we want to make sure that the circle shrinks down back to its original size. So if we want to get the distance between our mouse position and one of these circles, then we first need to get our mouse's position. And we can do that through our event listener over here. This anonymous function always has what's known as an event argument. So within this anonymous function, all we're going to do is add an event argument, and if we console log this out, and move our mouse, you'll see that we actually have an object being returned to us. And these objects represent all the data that are associated with our event as it's happening on the screen. So you'll see that when this event occurred, our mouse was at an X position at 226 pixels, and our Y coordinate was at a position of 239 pixels. And if we look inside another one of these and scroll down, you'll see that our X and Y values are different because our mouse was at a different position as this event was being called. And you'll see that we just keep creating more and more event objects as we move our mouse across the screen. So with this event argument, this event object, we can go ahead and grab the X and Y values of the event that is occurring. And we're going to use those X and Y values to compare them to the position of the circles on the screen. And once we compare them to the position of the circles on the screen, that's when we can calculate the distance between our mouse position and the actual X and Y values of the circles. So since we first want to get the X and Y value of our mouse, we are going to be creating a mouse object like so. And this is going to have an X coordinate, which at first is going to be undefined, and a Y coordinate, which is also going to be undefined. We don't want to set this just yet. We're going to set this within our mouse move event listener. So our mouse, that X, is going to be equal to our events, that, I believe, let's go ahead and look inside our object to make sure we're selecting the right thing. It's going to be equal to our event.x property. And same thing is going to go for our mouse's y property. It's going to be equal to our event y's property. And we can test this out by console logging our mouse object. Refresh the page. You'll now see we have an object with just an x and y coordinate. And we are going to use this, as I said, to compare it to the actual positioning of each individual circle. And if the distance is less than 50, the circle is going to grow. So now we need to compare it to each individual circle's coordinates. So we are going to go head on over to our update function. We are going to add another conditional below all of our velocity and wall bouncing stuff here. So we are going to say this is where the interactivity occurs with a comment. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get the distance between our mouse's positioning and the actual circle's positioning. So to do that, all we need to do is select our mouse, its x coordinate, and from our mouse's x coordinate, we are going to subtract each individual circle's x coordinate. And if this is less than 50, we want to call a function. So first we need to create a conditional, make this conditional at least. And that should be good to go. So if this is less than 50, we want to grow the radius of our circle. So we are going to say this dot radius plus is equal to 1. And now let's watch what happens when we refresh the page. We start moving, you'll see everything to the right starts growing sporadically, and there's really no control here. We only want to track what is within 50 pixels within our mouse's positioning. So this isn't good enough. This isn't going to cover all of those use cases, all the conditions we want to track in order to ensure that happens. So right now, all the circles to the right of the mouse are growing because let's say that this .x is equal to 200 while our mouse.x is equal to 100. Well, if that's the case, we are going to get a value of negative 100, and obviously that's going to be less than 50. So that means that all the circles to the right of our mouse are going to be growing by 1. We need to take into account that we don't want that to happen. So as a result, we are going to add an an AND operator, and we are going to say if mouse.x minus this.x is greater than negative 50, then we are going to grow its radius by 1. So let's go ahead and see what happens with that. So now not everything to the right of the mouse is going to grow, just whatever is within 50 pixels of our mouse from the left or the right. But the issue is, if we refresh the page again, you'll see everything to the top and the bottom of the mouse is still growing. So we need to take into account as well that the circles above and below our mouse should only be 50 pixels within the distance of the mouse. So right now we're only tracking our x values. We need to take into account our y values as well. So I'm going to space this just to give us some space. And let's go ahead and full screen this to better show you the conditional going on here. We are going to add another AND operator. And we are going to say only increase the radius of the circle if mouse.y minus the circle's y coordinate is less than a distance of 50. But we also need to take into account the negative number. So we need to say only increase the radius of a circle if the mouse.y minus this.y, the distance between the two, is no less than negative 50. And let's go ahead and shrink this, refresh the page. Now you'll see only the circles within 50 pixels distance of our actual mouse are going to be growing. But it still leaves us with a bit of an issue. These circles keep growing, and the ones that aren't 50 pixels within the distance of the mouse, they don't actually shrink as they should be within the demo I showed you earlier. So that's something we'll also need to take into account, is what happens when this conditional is not true. And we can test what is not true by adding an else statement at the end of this. And when this is not true, we are going to decrease the radius of each individual circle by 1. So basically all the circles are shrinking to the point where they're not even visible and we get a bug within the console. Now this is happening because this conditional is not true, so we're actually subtracting 1 from the radius of all circles until they equal 0. So we need to make sure that these circles do not decrease past a certain point. So instead of just doing an else statement, we are going to add an else if. We are going to say only subtract 1 from the radius of a circle if this dot radius is greater than 2. So this way the radius of the circles, the radii of the circles, they won't actually go into nothing. They'll at least be 2 pixels wide in radius once they go outside the distance of our mouse. So now you can see when we're hovering over these, the circles don't go back to their original size. They go down to a smaller size as specified here. This is the size that they're shrinking down to. But at the same time, they're still kind of achieving what we wanted to in the first place. We're hovering over the circles and they're growing to a certain distance. And as we hover out of them, they're going back down to a specified size. So to achieve the same effect I showed you within the demo, we need to ensure that these circles don't expand past a specified limit as they grow. So this is going to go within this conditional. Right now, this conditional is managing when the circle should grow when the mouse is within 50 pixels of each individual circle. So to ensure this, we are going to not add on to our current conditional because that is already quite lengthy. We are going to be adding a new conditional within this. And we're going to say only increase the radius of each individual circle if each individual circle's radius is no greater than, let's just say 40 for now. Then we'll grab our increment radius code and place it within this new conditional. So now if we refresh the page and we hover over these, you'll see that the circles now have a max limit in which they can grow to. They can't grow past this limit because we added this new conditional. And for good coding purposes, it'll actually be good to transform this 40 into something that is more understandable. So instead of just saying that make sure the radius does not grow past 40, we're going to say make sure that the radius is no greater than max radius specified as a variable. And we can specify a variable up top. Let's just do it right beneath our mouse object. And our max limit, is that what we call it? Max limit? Max radius. And our max radius is going to be equal to 40. This is the max radius in which our circle should grow to. Alright, so now we're following some better coding conventions because we're specifying what our max radius should be instead of just having an arbitrary number within this conditional. And we can do the same thing for our minimum radius. Let's go ahead and add that in here as well. So we'll say instead of 2, min radius. And right beneath our max radius, let's go ahead and add a min radius of, yeah, let's just go ahead and do 2 for now. Alright, so we have more readable code now. But there are still a few things we need to do here in order to get that nice aesthetic that I showed you within the demo. So some of the things we need to do here are change up the colors of these circles. And to change up the colors of these circles, we need to do a little bit of math here. It's a little interesting topic. We need to create what is known as a color array. And this is just going to be an array that stores all the colors we would like our circles to be. If we wanted our circles to be randomized between 5 different colors, our circle array would contain 5 different objects. And within these, we'd specify hexadecimal values that will represent individual colors. So let's just go ahead and put some random colors in here for now. And then once we actually want to make this thing start looking good, that's when we'll go ahead on over to a website called Kuler, which will go ahead and give us color palettes. And we can use the hexadecimal values from there to give us a nice look instead of just randomized colors as we're doing right now. Alright, so now we have an array of colors, but now we need to actually insert these colors within each individual circle's fill property. So let's go ahead and check out where we're drawing our circle right now. You'll see that we have a stroke style, we have a stroke, and we also have a fill. Let's go ahead and get rid of our stroke style for now. So we just have a fill. You'll see that we just have black circles at the moment with no stroke. We need to change the circle's fill style for each individual circle. And each fill style is going to be equal to one of these options within this color array. So how do we randomly select a color from the color array? Well, first, we need to access our color array, and then we need to specify a random index. So we need a number from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to specify a random indice from 0 to 4 because we start counting our arrays at 0. So how do we get a random number from 0 to 4, or at least the length of our array? Well, it's a little tricky for beginners, but this is how it's going to happen. We need to get a random number, so we are going to use math.random. We need a random number between 0 and the length of this array. And the length of this array is going to be 5 since there are 5 different elements in here. Let's go ahead and test that out really quickly. Let's just go ahead and console out our color array's length. Excuse me, that's just console logging out our color array. We want to specify our length. And you'll see the length of our array is 5. It's just how many elements are within our array. So we want a random number between 0 and the length of our array, which is going to be 5. And we're using colorArray.length because if we wanted to add more colors onto this, colorArray.length will take care of any calculations for us. So we don't need to get rid of this and just specify we have 5 colors within an array or 6 colors and so forth. ColorArray will automatically take the number of elements within an array and do any calculations you need in the process to get a random color. Alright, so we are specifying get a random number between 0 and 5, but this will give us decimal numbers. If we actually run this in the browser, you'll see we're not actually getting any colors. And that is because right now this whole function that we're doing with math_random and colorArray.length, it is giving us a decimal value. So we want to make sure that we're getting a whole number so we can access each individual index within this array. So to get a whole number, we are going to use another function called math.floor. And we are going to wrap our whole multiplication function within this. So all math_floor does is it gets the lowest whole number closest to the value that's outputted. So if I were to get a value of 0.5, math.floor would take that value and transform it into 0, since that is the lowest whole number right beneath the value. Let's say my number were 1.2. If I were to put that within math.floor, well, my end result would be 1. Same thing goes for something like 3.8. If I were to get 3.8, we get the lowest value beneath that, lowest whole number, which would be 3. So with this in place, we should get random values, random colors as our circles. And you'll see that we actually have a pretty wild effect going on here. This is a lot that goes into Canvas. It's just experimentation. And right now, this is happening because we are calling this draw function every single time within our update function. Right at the bottom here, we are calling draw. And since we're calling a random color from our array over and over again within this draw function, well, the colors are changing dynamically over and over again as well. So we want to make sure that the colors of our circles are only set once rather than set over and over again within this draw function. And to do that, we are going to take this function right here that we wrote, and we're going to add a new property to our circle called color. This is going to be equal to a random color from our color array. So our fill style is then going to be equal to this color, and that should fix the issue of our blinking circles, and it does. So now we have some nice looking colors here, some randomized colors, and we are going to change these up to a nicer color as soon as we finish everything else. But go ahead and play around with this. I say this about every episode, play around with it. Change up the colors a bit. Go ahead and change up the randomization stuff. See what you can do and just what kind of cool stuff you can produce, because it's really fun and it's what's going to help you learn the most in the long run. Alright, so we're almost done here. We need to now randomize the actual sizes of our circles. So as you can see, all of our circles right here, they are all very small and they're all very uniform. We want to make sure that the circles that are bouncing around are random sizes to give it a little more variety, a little more of a randomized feel to our actual canvas piece. So to randomize the actual minimum size of the circles, we are going to be giving our circle's radius a random number. So all of our circles radii, they are being declared within this for loop down here, and you can see that we just hard coded in a value of 30 for our radius. So instead of a value of 30, let's go ahead and do math.random. And let's say that we want a random value from 1 to, let's just say 4 for now. And to get a random number 1 through 4 instead of 0 through 4, we first need to get a random number 0 through 3. So we're going to say math.random times 3. And then once we get a random number 0 through 3, we are going to add 1 onto the end of this. So how this works is, if we get a lowest value of 0, a random number 0 through 3, well then at least we'll be adding 1 onto that, so we know that we're getting a minimum radius of 1. And if we get the highest value of math.random times 3, which will be 3, we're adding 1 onto that as well, so we're successfully getting a range 1 through 4, rather than just a range of 0 through 4. So we want to make sure our circles aren't that small. We want to make sure that they have a minimum radius of at least 1. So this should make things look a little different over here, and you can see that indeed they do. Some of our circles are smaller, very slightly smaller than the others, and it's kind of giving it a nice variety compared to what we had before. But if we start hovering over these, you'll see that eventually the circles become uniform again. And that is because we have a set minimum radius, a hard-coded minimum radius up here, which says that the minimum radius after a circle grows and shrinks back down is going to be 2. So it's not actually shrinking back down to its original size that it was set as, it's actually shrinking back down to the set value that we put here with a minimum radius of 2. So we want to make sure our circles shrink down to their original radius rather than a set value as we had up here. So to do this, we are going to be creating another property. This is going to be called this.min radius. So each individual circle is going to have its own individual minimum radius, because one circle's minimum radius, its starting radius could be 1, while the other could be 3, the other could be 2, the other could be 2.5. We want to make sure that each individual circle has its own minimum radius, so it shrinks down to what it was originally set as. And so instead of setting it to something like minimum radius, we're going to set it to the circle's original radius. So this dot radius right here, it's going to be altered by these conditionals. It's going to be increasing and it's going to be decreasing depending on the mouse's positioning. But this dot min radius is not going to be altered at all. We are going to say keep decreasing the size of our circles as long as the circle's radius is greater than each individual circle's minimum radius. And with that in place, you'll see that the circles actually shrink down to their original size and not one uniform size. So we're actually adding some nice variety here, some clean code and some stuff that's ensuring that our circles are going back down to their original size. So this is good, but it's not great at the moment. There's still a lot of white space here, and it's not that appealing to me in my eyes. So let's go ahead and add more circles to this. Let's go ahead and bump this up to 800. That should be good. Go ahead and mess around with this. See how many circles you can add without crashing your program. Let's go ahead and refresh this, and you can see this is a lot more interesting, especially when we actually make this full screen, like so. And that presents an issue when we make this full screen, is why isn't the canvas actually being responsive to the width and the height of our browser? Well, that is because we need to add another event listener specifically for resizing our browser window. So right now we have an event listener of mouse move. Let's go ahead and add an event listener of resize. This is going to be called whenever the browser is resized. So we need a function to call over and over again whenever we resize our browser. And now we need to do a few things to ensure that our canvas is the full width and height of our browser each time we resize it. To ensure that, all we need to do, we need to grab this original code that we wrote from the first episode, which resized our canvas width and height based on its first refresh. And we want to make sure that we're calling this canvas resize code every time the browser is resized. So this will ensure that the canvas is always going to be the full width and height of the actual browser. And if we refresh this and start dragging our browser, you'll see that the canvas is actually extending, but our circles, they're starting to move over into the other side of the canvas, but they're not being generated dynamically over here when we actually resize the browser. So to ensure that the circles are being generated dynamically each time the browser is resized, we need to add a few initialization techniques to our event listener. So what's going to happen is we are going to call a function called init each time we resize our canvas, but now we need to create an actual function called init. So right above our animate function, we're going to say function init, and within this we are going to basically be resetting our circle array. We're basically going to be calling all of this in here over and over again each time we resize our browser. We're basically just replacing all the circles, generating them in new positions, so that they're always going to be filling up the entire screen. So let's go ahead and grab this code, paste it within our init function. And since we're putting this within a function, we need to make sure that we're actually calling it so it can be generated the first time. Refresh the page, and you'll see that we have an issue. And let's go ahead and check out our console to see what's going on here. And you'll see that circle array is not defined, and that is because the scope of our circle array is currently only within this init function. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're taking it out of there. Refresh the page. And let's see what happens when we resize our browser. And you'll see that we're generating multiple circles over and over again. And it's starting to get pretty laggy in the process. So let's go ahead and refresh that and find out what's happening. So each time we're calling init each time we resize our browser. And since we're calling init over and over again, it's supposed to generate 800 circles, and it's also pushing 800 circles into our circle array. We're not actually resetting our circle array back to 0. We're not actually resetting it to a clean slate. We're just adding circles on and on to the end of the array. So to ensure that we're resetting it to a clean slate, we're going to say circle array is equal to an empty array right before we call all the circle generation code right here. And if we do that, you'll see that fixes our issue, and circles are being generated dynamically as we go about resizing our browser, which is exactly what we want. So to finish off this episode, let's go ahead and choose a better color palette so we get something that's more interesting and a little more eye-pleasing than what we have right here. My website of choice for choosing color palettes is called Kuler. And you can just type Kuler into Google. And within Kuler, you can click the Explore button and explore different color palettes that people have created. So you'll see that we have a number of different color palettes here. You'll have most used, most popular, all themes. Just really go through here. These are really well picked out color themes for the most part. Pick something that's going to be eye appealing to you. Personally, I think I like this one. This is very similar to what I had in the original demo, so I'm going to choose this one. And to get the color values for this color palette right here, all we have to do is click Edit Copy. And you'll see that each of these individual colors has a hexadecimal value beneath it right here. So if I wanted my circles to be blue, I can just go ahead and grab this, go back to my color array, and paste it there. And we're just going to do this for all of our colors. We're just going to copy, paste, copy, paste. And we're almost there. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Alright, so now we have what should be a better looking color palette than before. And if we check this out in the browser, you'll see that this is a lot better looking than it was. This is a lot more professional looking as the colors were handpicked to blend and give off a more professional vibe. So we now have a full-fledged canvas piece that takes animation, interaction, and browser resizing into consideration. We also know the 4 basic skills required to become a Canvas Pro, and should now have a solid foundation that you can use when developing any interactive canvas piece. In regards to next steps, try replacing the arc drawings with points, lines, rectangles, and even images. Try different randomization techniques, see what other conditionals you can add to make objects react with their environment. There's a lot you can do here, a lot to experiment with. Just take it into your own arms, really see what you can do here to produce some badass canvas pieces. So that's going to be it for this one, folks. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot along the way. In regards to future Canvas courses, I do have a bit more planned out, in which we'll learn how to cover specific one-off Canvas animations, such as how to make a bunch of particles on screen attract to a certain point, and how to create HTML5 Canvas games. So stay tuned, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Later.